Chapter 37, Broken. Broken. Her eyes opened to a smile, dark lips spreading to part over even, white teeth. Cellophane, of course, Fritha passed out so often now, it was probably negligible to the others.
Was I out for long?
No, he assured, arm slid about to support her as she made to sit.
Barely a quarter hour, you are getting better.
Jahara had glanced back at the noise, straightening from where she had been talking to the stony-faced Anomen and suddenly marching towards them.
Fritha, lie back down now. You were supposed to say when she was awake, Cellophane.
I'm fine, the girl dismissed, already impatient with her coddling. The two helped her to stand, Jahara rather more begrudgingly and using the opportunity to check for injuries.
Fine, indeed. I am not surprised you fainted, this bravado of yours will only take you so far, Fritha.
Fritha tuned it out, she had heard it all before, the activities behind her more than enough distraction from the lecture. Valigar, Minsk, and Imoen were working their way along the nearest bookcase, throwing books into the rough sack Minsk held. Fritha frowned.
Was not our deal with the Amma that they have first pickings of this place? They won't miss things like this,
reasoned Imoen, no pause to her task, and Fritha noted no glance was sent her way.
Besides, saving the Sword Coast doesn't come cheap.
Fritha watched as a gold-bound, ruby-set tome was tossed merrily into the depths.
No, I suppose it doesn't. Here, Minsk help me with these,
Imoen continued, reaching up to a shelf a head's height above her and stacked with ancient books that looked to be missing half their bindings.
I wouldn't bother with those,
warned Valigar,
it will be too hard to find buyers. Not to sell,
she laughed easily,
to study. You heard Shivistra, these books were collected to help Abizagal harness the power of his blood, our blood. If it can work for him, it can work for me. Imagine if I could channel the power of the taint into my magic.
She pressed, in face of his frown.
The people I could save, the things I could do. Vals, there could be something here, I could learn how to.
She swallowed, gaze flicking reluctantly to the sling he now wore. Valigar sent her pained look, the hand that was still whole reaching up to lightly caress her hair.
Imoen, there is nothing here I need.
Tempers flared as she brushed him off.
You. Why are you so stubborn? I want to help you. These books contain only corruption, Imoen. Magics that harness the power of blood, that is not even the way of the weave. So we just leave them here?
Imoen demanded.
For the Amma to take them and sell them on? No, they must be destroyed.
Imoen looked positively wild, whirling suddenly to the girl behind them.
Destroyed? No. The knowledge here is immense, Fritha, tell him.
Fritha sighed, letting fingers trace over the peeling cover of the book discarded to the table before her, frayed, faded green linen that gave no hint at the power within. It went against everything she had ever been taught, and yet.
Books are not evil and neither is knowledge, but I've seen enough of the world to know that if something can be used to hurt others, it will be. We will take anything we can safely sell on, the rest, we will burn before we leave. Fritha. Are you mad? The whole library? The Amma? We'll sell nigh on everything they find here,
cut in Valigar firmly.
Can you guarantee where these books will end up? Or how they will be used? There is more than enough treasure in that throne room to satisfy our promise to the tribe. Fine, then.
Snapped Imoen, pushing roughly past Minsk.
If that's what you're going to do, you can finish it without me.
The outburst did little for the group's mood, though Frithha doubted it could have become much worse, the girl taking Imoen's place while her friends sulked wherever they were not, skulking between the bookcases and muttering darkly. It did not take long to harvest everything of value, the more expensively decorated tomes supplemented with a few more benign volumes Frithha felt sure they could sell, their group gathering on those curved stone stairs.
We have everything.
A round of nods, Minsk hefting the sack at his back. Frithha glanced to the girl next to her.
Imoen. You want to do it yourself.
Fine, she sighed, tripping down the steps, Brianna's lantern in hand. The oil smelt rich and peaty, though she had little time to appreciate the scent. The flames burst to brilliant life with a trace of smoke, licking eagerly up the wooden frame, pages of the nearest book curling back, ash-blackened petals before the fire consumed them wholly. Frithha was already back at the stairs, pushing her way through the others to take the lead, the first to step through the heavy stone door.
Let's go.
They reached the horse within the hour, the beast given food and water at Jahara's insistence. Before they set out once more, the others used the chance to change into something dry. Frithha pulled on the welcome warmth of her blue linen robe, muscles aching with the movement. It had been a long day. It would have likely been safe enough to camp there for the night, a quick check by Minsk confirming no sign of the gorge's previous guardians. But it seemed no one wanted to remain there, an air of tragedy hanging over the place despite their relative success, and the plains were in the deep and blue-grey twilight before they were even ready to set out again. Another hour's walk retraced their steps of the day, and the stars were out and making their sweep of the heavens before they finally halted to make camp.
Well,
began Jahara, surveying the ring of tents that edged the pool of firelight,
we should see about a meal. Is anyone even hungry?
Muttered Imoen, the girl curled about her pack, such a sentiment practically unheard of from her. No one answered anyway. Anomen was staring to the desert at the silhouette of a lone acacia tree, thin branches weaving a pattern in black against the sky, a complex canopy of old lace.
I would have the shovel,
he said, at last, to the silence, offers of help instantly forestalled as he added,
I will dig the grave alone.
Frithha watched him labor there, adding his own dark outline to the trees, and the stew was bubbling merrily. By the time he had stopped, the man's silhouette upright once more and leant upon the spade. She rose, dusting off her legs just to break the awkward tension that had suddenly suffused every limb.
I think it's time.
Jahara and Minsk brought the body, carried in a cloak Frithha no longer wanted back, and the woman was laid out next to her freshly dug grave, the tilled earth a rich red in the lamplight. Anomen stooped down to take something from her belt pouch, though Frithha could not see what before he had thrust it into his pocket and straightened again.
Someone should say something,
ventured Imoen. She was staring at Anomen, but the man did not notice, gazing instead at the woman laid serenely by the waiting grave. Frithha cast about the fidgeting bodies, the silence billowing to a well of voiceless anxieties. She didn't think Torm would be listening, and, in that moment, she promised herself that if she became Bal, the woman would sit at his right hand in all honor. A twist of guilt shoved Frithha forward a step. Around the grave, shoulders relaxed.
We return this body to the earth, its spirit long departed past the veil. As a Lund, this woman was our enemy. But in Brianna, we found a friend, and it is as this we will miss her, in her strength and loyalty and laughter, and I pray that any gods listening look kindly upon her and see her as we did.
Murmured oaths and the group disbanded, Minsk and Jahara stepping forward once more to lower the body into the pit. The druid leaned in, gently wrapping the cloak edges over her before she straightened to let Minsk take over, the Rashami taking up a lilting ode to the warrior dead as, shovel by shovel, he slowly covered the body. Frithha pulled her robe about her, retreating from the sudden chill. Soliphane remained at her side as they halted together a few yards from the grave, the girl unwilling to leave, but having no reason to stay.
Another dead, another step closer, another victim left in the wake. You feel guilty? Yes. She came here for me, to help me, and I killed her. That's all my heritage ever does, destroys lives.
A Noman was watching Minsk work, stiff and unreadable as he turned sharply on his heel and disappeared into the darkness.
Someone should speak to him. I will go.
She nodded, pressing her forehead into the drow's shoulder and hoping she willed into the man that overwhelming gratitude she held for his presence there. A soft pat on her back showed her he had understood, before they parted, Soliphane disappearing after the night.
You two are as thick as ever, I see.
Frithas sent the druid a wan smile.
At least one of my siblings will still speak to me.
A shared glance to the girl who was back and seated beside the fire, glowering into her knees.
Mon will come round,
reasoned Jahara.
It can be hard to bear, that knowledge we are not as invincible as we feel. And what about you? It cannot have been easy to kill Brianna. No,
Fritha corrected,
it was all too easy. I just saw the dagger rise and then she was dead. She would have murdered a Noman,
Jahara reminded quickly. But Fritha shook her head, the guilt not so easily assuaged.
Would she? I interrupted something. She and a Noman.
She trailed off, unable to say more, the revelation lost in an incoherent mess of regret and anger. Why did the world always do this to her? Jahara, at least, had an answer of sorts.
Come. Dinner.
Mon did not glance up to their approach, mulishly staring at the scuffed toes of her old brown boots. Jahara pretended not to notice, instead lifting the lid from the pot in a cloud of steam to drip condensation hissing into the fire.
Now, let us see what we have here. Oh, yes.
The druid gasped through her scalding sip, spoon dropped back into the pot to stir it round.
It will be ready soon. Mon, is Valigar joining up for dinner? No,
she answered shortly.
He's gone to our tent. The draft you gave him made him sleepy. Yes, it can have that effect. Though perhaps after the day, it would be for the best that he gets some rest. I'll take his watch,
murmured Fritha. Mon snorted.
Well, that's big of you. Right, well,
continued Jahara briskly,
I will just add the dried chives to this and it will be about ready to serve. Pass me your bowl and the herbs, Mon. I just said I don't want any, and I don't have the chives. Fine then, you do not have to have any, but I want the dried chives. I am sure they are in your...
Jahara reached for her bag, Mon snatching it from reach.
I said, I don't have them. I'm going to bed.
She snapped, on her feet and swinging the bag up onto her shoulder with momentum enough to send her staggering forward. Her knees wobbled beneath her as she forced that first stubborn step and stalked from the circle, leave the two women to stare after her. Fritha lay down, closing her eyes to watch the fire dance through dark red lids.
Do you ever wish you had just stayed in the grove, never left? Sometimes,
Jahara conceded without shame.
But then I recall the people aided by my presence in the world and I know my place is out here. Yes. I think I've probably hurt as many as I've helped by now. And I can't see how I can redress the balance in the coming days. Abizigal is dead and Sendai still must fall before she can do the same as he.
A contemplative pause from the druid.
You still plan to take battle to Sendai, even now, knowing we are playing into Melisand's hand? What choice have we? Sendai raises an army just as Abizigal did. And if that gives Melisande enough power to ascend. For now, it's a risk we must take. Just as you risked throwing yourself onto Draconis?
Questioned the woman sharply. Fritha snorted. She should have known her scolding for that had been postponed rather than abandoned.
Well, he wasn't a dragon when I went for him.
Her reasoning failed to appease the druid, the pot clanking as she stirred vigorously.
Really, Fritha, the injuries you sustained, could have sustained. Do you know how lucky you are? And then to go and confront Abizigal. Yes,
Fritha considered slowly,
but that is the thing, isn't it? There is too much power in me now, and the sword unused to having the limitations of a mortal body. It screams for me to kick down doors and tear out hearts, without considering that such actions will merely lead me to an even weaker state. And if it does not care for me, it certainly does not care for anyone I'm with. I try to temper it. When Abizigal first arrived, I tried to press myself back. I knew we were too injured to battle him safely, but the child within was screaming, demanding I take the chance to crush my enemy while I had it. It's becoming harder to resist, especially when a small part of me understands such sacrifices are needed.
She could sense the woman watching her, searching for a way to pose her question.
Fritha, what do you remember of your time in the temple?
Fritha sighed, heaving herself up to meet the woman's gaze.
My mother and the other sisters caring for us, playing with the other children. Just life there, really. It was simple and home. I was never exposed to anything terrible, at least not until the day the Harpers stormed the place and interrupted the first of the sacrifices. You recall that day, and Gorian's rescue?
Jahara winced at the words as soon as they were spoken, perhaps expecting a sharp counter to this version of events. Fritha had no more energy for such empty anger though. Gorian took the reasons for his later betrayals to his grave, but he had rescued her in the first and she could be grateful for that.
Yes, I remember it.
Her lack of rebuke seemed to embolden the woman.
Were you to have been sacrificed?
A little girl in blood-red robes kept that bubbling excitement well hidden beneath the solemn frown, small hands passing up the long, bone knife. Her mother took it with an approving smile. On the altar, a baby squirmed. Fritha smoothed her lips together, mouth dry.
I don't know. But I do know what Melisande needs to be able to take the throne. She could kill every ballspawn from here to the gate, but it would never be enough, not when there is such a concentration elsewhere.
She tapped her chest, a smile blossoming with that feeling of pleasure at being so perversely special.
She will need the essence in me and any other of the powerful ballspawn still left. While I live, the throne is safe, from her at least. Sendai is still a threat, of course, as will be any other children strong enough to take it, but once they are dead.
Fritha trailed off with a shrug, adding simply.
If Melisande desires Bal's legacy then she will have to kill me or wait until I kill her, and then.
Fritha smiled into the fire.
It's over.
Solifane paused, unwilling to return, yet reluctant to press on and disturb the figure knelt there in the pale circle of his wear-light, the red dust about him scuffed in a short trough where he had fallen sharply to his knees. He could have been praying, but the drow could make out no murmur to the air. A noman's head bowed as he stared unblinkingly at something in his hand. Solifane closed a step, the light catching on something small and silver, but it was not the eye of his god, and he finally forced himself to break the silence.
A noman.
A deep, terse sigh misted in the night.
So, she sent you then? I was once the dog who trotted willingly on her errands. I am glad she has found another.
Solifane ignored the slight.
She is concerned.
A no-man whirled, a fist thrown to the dirt with his roar.
She is the root of this. Brianna is dead. What does Fritha think you can do? You of all people, the man who for months kept it from us, from me. You knew what is coming. You knew she is going to become Ball.
Solifane faced unflinching the anger of a betrayal that was not meant for him.
I did. And now so do you.
He sighed, tired and ready to be back at the fire, the man half turning to leave.
I came as she asked, but I can see that it is better you are alone. May you find the solace you seek in the darkness.
And with that Solifane stalked off, retracing his dusty footsteps, the campfire but a point of light that it hurt to gaze upon. What had he expected to achieve there, offering words of consolation to a man he barely knew? But Solifane already had his answer. He had not come to ease the knight's grief, he had come to ease hers. The drow snorted, Solifane, the loyal hound. Out of the shadow a shape was lumbering, shovel resting casually over one broad shoulder.
Do not waste your efforts, Minsk, he wants no company. Good Solifane.
But Solifane kept moving, every man had their limit, and that day had wrung its last from him. Minsk watched the drow pass him by. Such trouble crept into even the most wary of hearts. In his pocket, Boo trembled and the warrior returned to his path, the distant beat of light growing brighter with each step. The man did not turn at his approach, Minsk had not expected him to.
She is covered and sleeping now, good Anomen. Thank you, Minsk. No, no thanks,
the Rashami sighed.
It is a warrior's honor to bury their brothers, not always do we have the chance.
A bitter snort he had heard all too many times, some joke above the comprehension of the man who could not understand.
She was not our brother, Minsk.
The Rashami shrugged evenly.
She came here for Fritha, as much as of any of us. Yes, she did.
The man admitted, at length, continuing more brusquely.
Thank you, but I would be alone, Minsk. As you will, good Anomen. Grieve as you need, but know it is not a burden you must bear alone.
She lowered the bag into the corner, the straining leather creaking as it settled against the canvas walls. In the darkness, the large shape stirred under the blankets, Valigar sitting to catch her with a bleary smile. Imoen made her best attempt to return it.
Sorry, I was trying not to wake you. Do not worry,
he sighed, shifting onto his back.
Is it late?
She shook her head and moved further up the bedding to haul off her tunic, her boots removed before she had even crawled inside.
No, barely a quarter hour after you left. You must have almost passed out.
She made a show of folding the tunic neatly over her pack and fussing at her trousers' laces, any excuse not to turn and see that ghostly white sling.
Does it hurt?
In the corner of her eye, the knot on his shoulder bobbed with a shrug.
Not so much. Jahara's draft has dulled it, and me, as well, it seems.
He added, pinching the bridge of his nose.
I do not envy the one tasked to wake me for my watch.
The anger caught her so suddenly, she had whirled before she could stop herself.
You're not taking one. Fritha's volunteered for yours, and she can take mine too. Imoen. No. Look at you. This is all her fault. If she hadn't, if I had. Imoen,
he sighed, closing his free arm about her as she fell against him to sob against his chest.
Do not do this to yourself. This is no one's fault, but the creature who struck me. But your poor hand. There now, shush. There is always a cost. I once lost almost my whole group. All we can do is decide whether the cost we pay is worth what we aim to accomplish. And it was, Imoen.
He pressed gently, lifting her chin and forcing her to acknowledge the mild smile.
And it still is yet. But, why?
She cried, drawing back to dash the tears aside.
Why must it always be like this? I'm so tired of fighting. Over a year ago we left Candlekeep, every step hunted by those mercs. This was supposed to be over when we killed Saravik, but it all just got worse. We died insulted in a cellar. What was the point of coming back for this? Oh, Vals, I just want some peace. I know, but it is the way of life. Evil rises, the world suffers and someone must step in. Well, I've done my bit. We stopped the war and saved the elves. I've given all I should have to. Why must the world always demand more?
Valigar shook his head, gaze falling to the arm that was bound up across his chest, as though contemplating what it had already claimed from him.
It is not so much the world, as the people we are, Imoen. You think others around us do not see what needs to be done? They do. But it is those such as us who see it, who realize what it will mean, who feel that pressure to act against it. Well, don't want to feel any more.
She screamed back, not caring who heard her.
I was so frightened down there, and now look at you, broken so even the clerics can't fix it. Damn her. Damn her and this stupid war. I wish we had never come.
She fell again to his chest, Valigar pulling her closer to settle her into the crook of his arm and keeping up a constant murmur as he rubbed her heaving back, the bandages of his other arm bright in the gloom. Fritha leaned back, head pillowed upon the rim and eyes closed, her body weightless as the cool water lapped at her thighs and chest. The air was warm on her shoulders that peeked above the blanket she had draped across the long wooden tub to hide the rest of her from view. She had washed her hair before she had even stepped in, the damp weight of it now hanging from her head to pool upon the floor. She paid it little mind, the girl caught listening to the sounds of the camp about her, the flap of tent canvas, the faint rattle of pots as dinner was prepared, drowned by the occasional burst of laughter from the women in the pavilion next door. Fritha breathed a sigh, the air rich with the scent of wood smoke and one of her newly purchased treasures, jasmine oil all the way from Kalimport. It had been another 2 days before they had reached the Amma's camp and it had been hard going. Water had been rationed, and their travel was delayed by further storms, but even then, it had been the company that had weighed upon her. Imoen's outburst the night before they had left had been difficult to bear, Jahara bustling uncomfortably over the cooking pot as though she could not hear the muffled shrieks, but if anything the next couple of days had been worse. Anomen would speak to no one, while Imoen was still angry with her but pretending she was not, their friendship cooled to a cruel civility. Fritha honestly did not know which felt worse. At least the mood among the Amma was more cheerful, the camp light-hearted and merry after their return proved another peril of the desert dispatched and the tribe increased in wealth. An expedition of young warriors had left that afternoon, only hours after their arrival, to loot these promised treasures before another found them.
Fritha.
He always said her name so nicely, his slight accent making it softer, like a sigh. She opened her eyes again, first to take in the plain tent roof. The girl, turning to the man himself, sat cross-legged at her side on the large striped rug that was under the tub. His own hair was damp from where it had been washed out in the oasis and tied back from that striking face. Solafane smiled.
I thought you might have fallen asleep.
The light in there was mild, the fading sunlight softened by the shifting canvas walls to dance across his dark skin and reveal an undercast of blue which, in turn, brought out the silver to his eyes. The whole effect, though, was rather ruined by the ash-green tunic he was wearing, and Fritha resolved to get him a more complementary color when she next saw the local merchant, mayhole, violet, or perhaps a warm jade green. He had visited the merchant that afternoon to purchase a new cloak, the swathe of thinly woven wool folded neatly next to him now, the faded, autumnal yellow of dried primroses, it suited him.
No,
she sighed, sitting to retrieve the small cup that rested on the floor next to her for a long sip of wine,
just resting my eyes.
Cellophane snorted, taking up his own cup.
Basker caught me on the way back from fetching the wine. He seemed surprised I was joining you here. He asked if I had spoken to your father.
Fritha almost spat wine into her bathwater.
Really? Let him fret, this isn't either of the pavilions, and there are no rules of separation involving the wash tent. No,
Cellophane conceded,
though I suspect that is because when young women are mortified at the thought of even eating before their male counterparts, the elders here did not think they would need any rules regarding bathing.
Fritha's giggle rippled the water, joined by another round of laughter and cries from the women's pavilion next door. She shot a frown to the canvas wall, as though it would surrender answers to her gaze.
I wonder what they're up to, they've been like that for the last hour.
A high laugh rang out above the others, the giggle familiar enough to send a cool throb of melancholy through her chest. Cellophane drew a contemplative sip.
Mon is with them. Yes.
He watched her sigh and turn away, her attention back on her cup, the girl taking another sip to rest it on her chest beneath the blanket. He had, of course, attended females as they had bathed before, the situation usually having little to do with washing and involved him pulled in as well at some point, though he was trying not to consider that. His mind slipped back to it at unguarded moments, the night before they had reached the stronghold and her uncertain attempts at seduction. He had known then why she had tried and, even less flatteringly, why it had been with him, but the thought had still kept him awake that night after she had slipped into restless sleep, and nights since if he were honest. Another sigh, light and weary, the girl taking a long sip to contemplate her patterned shoulder, the stars there but freckles now to the unobservant eye.
My henna will have gone completely by the time we get back to Amcathran. Good,
he announced, fighting to rouse them both.
I look forward to painting something new. I have been considering my latest masterpiece for a while now. As long as it's nothing involving dragons.
He chuckled faintly, still no idea of what he was going to draw even as he discounted it.
No, I think we have had enough of dragons.
She let the smile ebb with his laughter, back to her contemplation, and he wondered absently if the cuts on her hands and knees would be faded by their return as well. Her legs certainly would not, the pale limb resting on the tub's wooden rim, the calf an angry mess of blues and pinks where taut skin met bruises. The large scab Fritha was trying to keep from the water encrusted the entire outer half, a rough brown continent upon a mottled sea, archipelagos speckling her knee and shin. Her shoulder and wrist were swollen too, likely from her dive to catch him in the elevator shaft, the thought twisted. If the fates had always planned to set her such tasks, could they not, at least, have made her a little more durable?
Well,
Fritha sighed, downing the last of her wine and setting the cup on the floor once more.
I should likely get out before I shrivel to a dried figure.
He turned his back to her, making to gather their few belongings, Fritha deftly wrapping the cloth that had covered the tub about her as she stood, rubbing herself down to pull on her white kurti and new deep orange trousers her own trip to the merchant had yielded. The hems were short enough to show her ankles and the thick silver bangle she had bought for one of them, her damp hair left to dry down her back. She would have hell trying to comb it out, but that was later. Outside, the hint of evening was creeping in with the hum of the night insects, the sky molten above the camp as, about the fires, women in a rainbow of kurtas bustled over dinner, the air of serene industry shattered by the explosion of noise behind them. A half-dozen young women had piled rather indecorously from the ladies' tent, the group cooing over the brunette in their midst.
You look so different. What will your husband think?
Fritha went to turn, something about the group making her gaze linger, drawing her again to that freckled face and its wavy mop of chestnut hair. And then it struck.
Mon.
All eyes darted to Fritha, the young women sensing enough to excuse themselves, tripping off to the preparations their sisters had been laboring in a while now, and Solafane took a polite pace back from the hesitant meeting. Mon seemed to be fighting back a grin, the dark red hair still damp and given to more of a wave than the drying formula of pink ever allowed it. Fritha could hardly form the words, the girl before her a stranger in more than just her look.
You dyed your hair? Yeah,
Mon confirmed airily, a hand nervously flicking back the henna'd tresses.
I fancied a change. Parvati and other girls helped.
Fritha felt the betrayal stab, her voice, when it came small.
You could have asked me. You were busy with Solafane. I didn't want to bother you. Oh. It looks nice.
Fritha offered at length. Mon sent her a careless smile.
Yeah, well, I'm going to see if Vals thinks so, too.
The task held a methodical familiarity that he had always found calming, and so much so, even the frustrations now presented by his injury could not rob him of the feeling. A sharp tap with the fine-pointed driver took out the peg, another hit loosing the blade from the hilt, guard, spacers and ferrule laid out on the rug where he had settled before the tent he shared with Mon on the edge of camp. He cleaned each piece in turn, the blade saved for last, a dash of water from his flask wetting the stone as he set to sharpening. It was hard to keep the strokes even with one hand, but an attempt to employ his other was rewarded with a flash of pain so great, it was all he could do not to yelp. He glanced to it now, laid useless in his lap. The bindings had come off that afternoon after a taciturn Anomen had expended a great deal of effort to heal it through. The hand hardly looked like it belonged to him anymore, a swollen, misshapen thing, though the dull ache it was never without said otherwise. Any movement was agony, but he knew such would fade with time, it was another issue which was causing him his restless nights. He had managed the fight with Abizigal on nerves and wool alone, the pain veiled by an urgent drive to survive. But the katana was a weapon for two hands, at least, the styles he knew were, and he was torn between attempting to press on with the limitations of his injury or working to find a new style that took it from the issue completely. After all, however his hand healed, it would never regain the same dexterity. His fingers twitched unconsciously and the pain flared. It was a question he would have to face, but not for a while yet.
Hey, Vals.
He glanced up, a girl before him he knew he recognized despite the soft mess of chestnut waves that fell to her shoulders.
Mon? You changed your hair?
He exclaimed. She smiled, uncharacteristically nervous as she ran a hand through the damp tresses.
Do you like it?
Yes, he laughed, a part of him still astounded.
You look very well, but what brought this about?
She shrugged, sitting beside him with a smile.
I just fancied a change.
That wicked grin for which he loved her.
You know, a change is not all I fancy.
Their lips met and, for a moment, all pain and worry fell away. It ended all too soon, but his task was easier with her there, settled in the crook of his arm, his crumpled hand laying gently in her lap as she watched him work.
I can help with that, if you want. Thank you, but it is best I get used to doing things with one hand, at least for a while. Everything is much easier now it is out of the sling. It still hurts though, doesn't it?
She confirmed quietly.
That is to be expected. But it will not hurt forever.
He assured her, the fact left unspoken that, though the pain would fade, the damage had already been done.
So why the sudden desire to change your hair?
He continued, glad to change the subject, and sure there was more to Mon than just a whim.
I thought you liked it as it was.
Sure enough, the girl heaved a sigh, the pressure between them increasing as she leaned in.
I did, but you were right. With it pink, people are going to see me in a certain way, perhaps that was what I liked most about it. But I can't be that girl forever. I came here, it was my choice and it still is. And this war has to be stopped, I know that. As one of the children, I have as much responsibility as anyone to do my part, and maybe I can take some pride in the idea I can do what others won't. So that's what I'm going to do.
She vowed, dark hair bobbing with a firm nod.
Grow up, study my magic and fight to end this nightmare and ensure not one more person ever has to suffer for this blood we carry.
He had no words to offer her, though their kiss sufficed, passionate and full of a longing to make her feel that love that swelled so fiercely in his heart. They parted breathless, his good hand cupped tightly about that pale face.
You always had such strength in you, enough even to heal the wounds of your heritage.
She nodded.
Yes, and perhaps one day I can even mend you. Oh, Mon,
he sighed. She could not let him finish, face pressed to that broad chest.
I know. Just let me do this, let me pretend. So.
She continued, at last drawing back from him.
Do you really like my hair? Do you?
He countered. She smiled and shrugged the misgivings away.
I'll get used to it.
She waited while he reassembled his katana, the blade sheathed as they retired with their tent to enjoy some time coiled together in the twilight's cool, lost in the feeling of their joined bodies. Mon stretched next to him, still naked and curled about his form in the darkness, his skin smooth against hers and scented with the faint aroma of cloves from the oil he used on his blade. It was wonderful there, the heat of the days making such intimacy a torment rather than a pleasure, and she lay still for a while, just listening to sound of his breathing. Somewhere in the distance, dishes clattered.
They will be serving dinner soon,
he offered eventually. Mon straightened, propped up on an elbow to regard him.
How about we eat in here, tucked away from world?
His smile flashed in the gloom.
As you would have it.
Outside, the women were busy putting the last touches to the meal, the others of their company gathered, out of the way, about one of the smaller fires, a few of the young men sat with them. Minsk noticed her first, a meaty elbow catching the woman at his side gently in the ribs.
Well, Mon, look at you.
Jahara chuckled, quite the proud hen.
Fritha mentioned you had dyed your hair, she is right, it suits you. As though any would say otherwise,
muttered a nomen. Mon's smile dropped to an instant scowl.
And what do you mean by that?
The knight affected an innocent look that made Mon want to slap him.
I am merely observing, my lady, that whether your hair suited you or not, no one here would speak against it to save your feelings. What do they call them?
He turned pointedly to the girl opposite.
White lies.
Fritha was anything but white, a deep flush suffusing her face. Mon moved an unconscious hand up to her hair, narrowed eyes flicking back and forth between the pair.
Fritha would tell me if it didn't look right, wouldn't you? Yes, definitely,
the girl hastened to assure her.
Your hair looks lovely, Mon, truly.
A nomen's smile hardened.
Yes, well, Fritha is well known for her honesty.
Mon was fast losing patience with their game.
Look, Fritha, if you don't think it suits me. No, of course not. I'd say, really. See, a nomen, stop stirring. Now, Is dinner nearly ready? I came to get some.
The knight did not let her finish.
If you will excuse me.
And 5 faces followed Anoman from the clearing. Imoen slumped into the place he had left.
What was that all about? I don't know,
snapped Fritha,
but I'm going to find out.
She caught him a few paces from the edge of camp. The canvas wall of the men's pavilion blocked the light from the cooking fires, the sky above burned to a deep coffee in their glow, the pair still close enough to keep her reproached to a furious hiss.
You bastard, Anoman! You spiteful bastard!
Frithas saw the sneer twist with his dismissal.
Is there some problem, my lady? Oh ho, my lady, is it? And since when did that title come to be bandied about like an insult? If you want to call me names, Anoman, at least be a man about it. Look at me!
She demanded, hands snapping upon his wrist to wrenching him about as he made to snub her anger.
I know you are upset about Brianna, but there is no need to behave like this. Behave like what? These comments. Your veiled threats to tell the others. That's all you care for, isn't it? You promised. Your damn secrets.
He made to pull away, Fritha held firm.
You promised me, Anoman. I won't have you holding this over me as some sort of punishment because you blame me for killing Brianna. If you're going to tell them, then march over there and tell them, otherwise keep that gob of yours shut.
His look of surprise finally saw him released.
Is that what you think, Fritha? That I blame you for her death?
Fritha drew back, a hand unconsciously raised to rub the opposing elbow. The oily guilt in her stomach gave a lazy squirm.
Well, I killed her, didn't I? It was my fault.
Anoman swelled, the anticipated explosion of noise no more than a hiss, the words spat at her with all the hatred he possessed.
Everything is your fault. Good or ill, it all comes back to you. Is there any decision I have made since meeting you that has mattered? By your hand, the order was given and gone. I fell to the vampires and was restored to life. Even Brianna was here for you. Everything she said, everything she felt, it was all for you. And what is there left for me, for any of us? The fates play a game around you and I am just another pawn. And now you are dying.
He glared at her, desperate and angry, willing her to deny it. In her silence, he turned away.
I wish I had never met you. Right, well.
Fritha swallowed. The lump wedged there hurt enough to make the welling tears threaten to spill and she fought them back. She was no use to him weak. Perhaps it was undue, but he needed someone to hate just then, and she owed him that, at least.
Well,
she continued, letting the steel creep in,
you've had your rant and muled about how unfair it all is, and now you can just grin and bear it, can't you? This land needs you, and it will suck you dry and spit your husk upon the sand without so much as a nod of gratitude.
She left him there, too astounded to make any retort. Her stalk back to camp halted. Only for that instant she glanced back, ready with her parting shot.
Oh, and yes, you're right, you're a pawn. Most people are. Get over it.
Fritha did not return to camp. Oh, she made sure she walked in that direction until Anoman could no longer see her, before she changed her path to the closest thicket to sob into her sleeve for a good hour. By the time she felt ready to face the world again, the night was deep, the air cool and welcome against her sticky face as she pushed from the undergrowth, steel grass catching at her legs as though it would pull her back within. She appreciated the effort, but she could not hide in there forever and she wondered absently if Anoman was back yet. Well, there was only one way to find out. Dinner was served and over by the feel of the place, the camp empty and thrumming with the low murmur of those returned to their tents, Soliphane stepping from the men's pavilion as she passed.
Fritha, you are back. I was worried, a no-man returned without you a while ago.
A nod to the tent behind him.
He is inside reading.
Well, that was one thing.
You went to talk to him?
She asked. The drow snorted, clearly deeming such a wasted effort.
No, indeed, but to fetch my cloak. I was coming to look for you.
Fritha affected an easy laugh.
You fret like Jahara. I had a lot on my mind, so I went for a walk.
He was not fooled for an instant.
You've been crying. Damn, can you tell?
She sniffed, abandoning the lie there to dab her eyes.
I hoped it was dark enough to hide it. Hell's teeth, it always takes an age to get my face right afterwards. There, better. Your eyes are still a little smudged, here.
He moved to take away some blot with the edge of his cuff, and she laughed wetly, swallowing another bout of tears to bat him away.
Ah, bloody coal.
Soliphane's frown did not ease.
What did he say? Everything he needed to. It should help. Come on, I'll do.
But upon stepping into the main clearing, it seemed Minsk and Jahara were the only two of their company still about, the pair hunched and talking over one of the cooking fires, 2 cups of arak resting on the sand before their rug. Fritha raised a cheery hand in return to the one with which the Rashami greeted her. Soliphane shot her one last frown and seemingly decided he may as well join her in the pretense.
Good Soliphane, I see you found young Fritha, who knew she had not come to any harm. No, indeed,
agreed Jahara, reaching down to the linen-wrapped bundle at her side.
Here, there is no stew left, but we saved you this.
Fritha smiled, taking the large flatbread Jahara handed to her, freckled in green by the coriander baked within. I'm not hungry swallowed to give just a nod of thanks, and she knew then she would eat it if only to show her gratitude that they had thought of her.
So,
the woman continued,
where were you? A no-man returned a while back.
Fritha shrugged, settling opposite the woman as Soliphane took the place next to her, the girl glad of the flatbread now resting upon her knee, a welcome distraction for her distrait fingers. The dough was springy, the chunk she tore scattering few crumbs to the fire, and the flavor awakened an unexpected appetite in her. She absently wished she had some ghee.
Just went for a walk, the evening is fine and I had things on my mind. Ah yes,
sighed Minsk,
how we understand this. Such troubled times, when brother must betray brother. Brianna was our ally, of this I am sure, yet in her heart, an evil also found its home. It was what she was raised to,
offered Soliphane,
and all she knew. When your whole life is defined by the ideals of those who value such evils, the lines between what you feel and what you believe are blurred. You come to doubt your heart even as it screams against all you do. I still have her pack,
said Jahara, a quiet melancholy to her words.
I was not sure what to do with it when we first quit camp, so I loaded it onto the horse with the others. Now it is in the women's pavilion with my own. Perhaps we should give it to a no-man,
considered Fritha aloud, though in truth she did not think such would be a good idea, at least, not then. Jahara caught the girl in that guarded stare.
Did you find out what was wrong? He is just taking her death hard,
she offered. Half the truth was better than they usually got from her those days. The pair opposite were nodding sagely.
It is hardly surprising, considering. Indeed, even Boo suspected nothing of this betrayal. That's because it wasn't one,
Fritha sighed.
Not in her eyes anyway. I don't think any of us could have seen this. For all her plans, Brianna was here to help. I don't even believe she wanted to kill a Nomen, it was just the only way she could see to serve her god, to serve me. But she made that choice, Fritha,
Solifane reminded.
In the temple there was no other way, but out here, she still moved to kill him. But was she given enough of a chance?
Fritha pressed, the guilt so close as to almost smother her.
If she had survived, could she have found a new way to live?
Solifane drew a breath to challenge this, but it was Minsk, this time, who took up her defense.
Who can say, young Fritha? You must ask instead, would have giving her that chance been worth the risk to others here and our task in these lands? What is one woman's life next to the failure of our quest? In the end, she walked her path as we walk ours, and Boo says that is all we can do.
Fritha let her face drop in a nod, the movement more to accommodate the sudden weight to her head than any agreement, Solifane noting this tiredness together, that yellow cloak about them both. Jahara leaned forward, setting 2 cups before the pair and filling them with the stray bottle of arak at her side before settling back to top up their own, the woman humming gently to herself.
Here, something to warm us. Come, Fritha, remind me, how does that tune run? Come song thrush and skylark and sweet nightingale, through meadows and groves we merrily go. For we're here and we're hearty, we're fair and we're hale, and life is too short for this sorrow and woe. Oh, sing the gay lark and let treble far fly.
Jahara had joined the tune, Minsk knowing enough to sing along with them, the pair covering the waver to her voice as the tears began to well and Fritha let them fall. For Valigar's crushed hand and a Nomen's crushed heart, and for poor dead Brianna and all that was to come. How comforting, that green field of boiling sky. To know she could sit there beneath it for a few hours, away from conflicts and disappointments that surrounded her waking life. Above, clouds raced by, shaped and torn by ever-howling winds.
Sister, it is your play.
Fritha dropped her attention back to the man opposite, their legs curved out before them and almost touching at the feet to provide shelter for the cards between. She threw the hanged man onto the pile, and drew another card to join the 6 already in her hand. Sanka had never been her game. Saravek watched the move with piercing grey eyes.
You are quiet today, sister, you have no questions for me.
She shrugged, knowing the discussion would make her feel little better, though she asked anyway.
Did any of your people tire of your fight, your plans to bring war to the coast? Tire, no, but some were foolish enough to acquire a conscience later on in my service. After he came to realize my plans to poison Duke Elton, there was one who even dared to conspire to take evidence of my dealings to the Flaming Fist. What happened? I discovered this without his knowledge, then invited him to an audience and threw him from the roof of the Iron Throne building.
Fritha snorted.
Very subtle, death, at least, has done wonders for your temper. How did you explain that to guards? Realtor told them he had had an accident, and piled gold upon them until they decided they believed him. Well, she sighed, not an option for me, sadly. You face dissent among your followers. Ah, you know, some of my friends sacrificed a lot to come here. They are beginning to resent it.
Saravik was frowning, tossing a card to land between them and take another.
I see some things never alter with quest or leadership, followers are ever selfish. Tell them to channel this anger at the enemy. It is their presence who tears them from home. Yes, conceded Fritha, though such speeches are easier to offer when you are their commander and not their friend. I suppose this comes to every child eventually. The blood demands to be sated, those the essence fails to lead to their deaths becoming twisted by it and its desire to kill the others. Even Tomoko likely hated you in the end.
Yes, he agreed gravely,
and I would have deserved it.
A nomen's sneering visage, another cool dismissal from Mon.
Yes. Still, not much longer now. Then Abizigal, sister,
continued Saravik with rained eagerness.
Dead, as of a few days ago.
The man drew back with a rare, appraising smile.
You advance with a speed that impresses even I, perhaps you will attain the godhood for which you strive.
Fritha heard the keenness he attributed to her goal, his past motives confused with her own, though she let it pass without comment, melding a small pile of 3 cards before her to offer curiously,
Did you recall a girl from the temple, not one of the children, an older girl who was an acolyte? Her name was Alund. I cannot say I remember her, there were many sisters there and not all tasked with our care. Why do you ask? She infiltrated our group in the guise of another, a Knight of Torm. We discovered her recently, she was killed. Surely a good thing, sister, if she planned to sacrifice you. No, she was not here for that. She came to help me.
Fritha felt the smile emerge, a small thing that shied from that penetrating stare.
I am the chosen, Saravik, I always was, even back at the temple. It's strange, isn't it? You were so powerful, and yet sealed your own doom the instant you set yourself against me.
That weathered face wore an expression of slack-jawed, almost comical surprise.
You were the one they chose. Yes, my mother was the high priestess. It is cruel, isn't it? Knowing that nothing you did mattered, that however you strived it was always destined to end certain way. All men should be free to make their own fates.
Saravik considered this a moment, shoulders finally heaved in an impassive shrug.
The future is written enough to allow for prophecy, sister, but a river's course may change over time. I regret many things from my mortal life, but fighting for what I desired is not one of them.
Her smile broadened to a wistful grin.
A good way to live and die, it seems. Do you know of another woman, called Amlisan? The Deathstalker,
he provided promptly.
Yes, she was not at the temple, but there are few who have not heard of her within Baal's order. She was utterly devoted to her lord and his orders, ruthless, manipulative, and tireless in her pursuit of the Baalspawn. Yes, well, the rest appears to be the same, though the devotion has waned somewhat. She is working towards her own ends now, killing the children and freeing the essence for her own ascension.
Saravik paused, eyes considering the card he had just drawn along with this revelation.
Interesting, she plans to seize the throne. Yes. Can she? Not as easily as one of the blood, but yes, it is possible. When we speak of seizing the throne, it is not a metaphorical allusion to that grasp for power. The throne of bone does exist, much as this place does, nestled in some pocket of the abyss, within Baal's realm in the hells. If Melisande means to take the power, she will have to get there. Though it is not simply a case of whoever reaches the place first, none will be able to claim the throne until enough of the essence has returned. So she could just wait there until I kill Sendai, then face me at the throne. She could, though I doubt any could reach the place until enough of the essence is collected there. It is like a shadow at the moment, a place existing only in the void between the planes. Just as your essence created this realm, so Baal's is restored and with each death gains more form.
He smiled at her over his cards.
What do you plan, sister?
She sighed, throwing her hand down before her, cards no longer holding her interest.
We'll head for Sendai and then, I suppose, hunt down Melisande. She was clever, manipulating you into killing all others in her path.
Frithha shrugged.
We'd have had to do it anyway eventually. What do you think she is doing now? I could not say, but if I were her, I would be killing my weaker rivals.
Frithha considered Jahara and the grove she had never seen. She hoped they were all right. A deep sigh, legs that never ached their heaving her up, and Saravik instinctively scooped the cards from the tiles before the wind could catch them.
Right then, I'm off, you can keep the deck.
The man nodded once, perhaps wondering whether she meant it as a joke considering the conditions there. He could hardly lay them out for a game of patience. Frithha left him guessing. End of chapter.